We're going to begin our service with military honors. I'm going to ask all of you, if able, to rise. If you are currently serving in the military or have been honorably discharged, you may perform the hand salute. Thank you. You may be seated.
Achen el Chagarim, Mechayin Yavohezehi, Azrimehim Adonai, Os Hashamayim Vaharetz, Al Yiten Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanom Shomrecha, Hinei Lo Yanom Velo Yishkan, Shomer Yisrael, Adonai Shomerecha, Adonai Tzilcha, Aleika Yeminecha, Yomam Hashemesh Voyakecha, Veyareach Balayelcha, Adonai Shemorcha Mikol Ravad, Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai Yishmor tzedcha uvovecha, Meyatcha v'hada olam.
Kol omer kra va'amar ma'ekra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chasto ketzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir novel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashvabo. Achein chatzir ha'am, yavesh chatzir novel tzitz udavar Eloheinu yakum li'olam. A voice says, cry out, but I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass. All of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar binoteshiar bitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni nashi shavev yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. To Mark and Sherry, to the family, to Ruthie, to the entire family, to grandchildren. Jay had this great smile. It went from one side of his mouth to the other. You've seen that smile. There's a grin that went from ear to ear. It filled a room. He was an optimist. No challenge was too great, and that optimism rubbed off on him and those around him, both in your family and to the many people he worked with in the business. He held on to that optimism despite difficult moments in life, the loss of his mother at an early age, his brother while he was still quite young, and his passion for life rubbed off on others as well. Jay must have known something about astronomy because his days had more than 24 hours in them, 25, 26 at least. It's ironic that we all just lost an hour last night. When the clocks changed, Jay never lost any hours. He lived life fully and deeply and with intent. He had a lot of stuff. Kept a lot of things, a lot of stuff around, books and papers and gifts that he was going to give to people. He loved buying from garage sales and swap meets. His life was filled with stuff. I know the grandchildren were excited whenever he would tell them to help him clear that stuff out of his car. He told them they could keep any dollar bills hidden anywhere in his stuff. It was like going on safari for treasures. It wasn't so much that he would clear out his stuff, he would move it around. He'd transfer it to different locations. He always held on to his stuff. But each of those items had a purpose, and they each had a function, and it always had to do with relationships, ultimately giving to somebody else. Late Jay's life was about relationships, about learning about you, knowing what was important to you, knowing what you needed, finding out what would touch your heart, and acting in a way that showed you that he cared. I don't know if he held on to things, he held on to friendships. He held on to conversations. He remembered every conversation, every experience he had with people, what mattered to you, and what you cared about. And then he would act from his heart. Love wasn't a word for him, love was an action for him to take. He acted out his love. I know he said, "I love you" a lot in these last periods of his life, but you always knew it to be true. He didn't always say it, he behaved it. He illustrated it in the exquisite thoughtfulness that he showed to people, his attention to detail, his memory. He could talk to anyone, and he did. He could relate to anyone, and he did. He loved walking around at work and speaking to associates, as well as vendors or other types of clients. He knew literally thousands of people, people whose lives he impacted, people who he mentored, people whose lives mattered to him. He kept everything that had happened to him in life right up here. And he learned and he grew from those experiences. He had seen marriage in his life. He had seen the ending of marriage in his life. But he grew as a person. And as he shared with Sue later in life, he grew more open and more communicative and more self-aware, and the two of them became close again. Mark, I know you spent some of your childhood years in California away from your dad, and you spent summers, though, with him, and you knew it was difficult for him to be apart from you. But he was patient, he learned to be patient, and he always made you feel special. Ultimately, as you grew up, and you began to work with him, you saw all those wonderful qualities on a day-to-day basis. Hard work, to be sure, but the desire to empower those around him, to create a team, truly a team, more than a team, a family in the business, a family feeling from those he worked with, a family that created the kind of trust and, yes, love that made your company makes your company such a special place to be. Your dad believed in himself, but he certainly believed in others. He could talk to anyone, yes, but he never spoke about himself. When he spoke to everybody else, he didn't speak about himself. He spoke about others. And he never complained. He never complained. Not about the losses, not about the setbacks, growing up in the Depression, the loss of mother and brother, the challenges with Scott. But he only looked forward. One of 4 children, at one time the youngest of 3, and then Renee was born, and he cared for Renee when she became ill. One of those things you would not know because he just didn't speak about himself. I told you when we spoke how he always maintained a reverence and a respect for the synagogue and for his religion, for his Jewish faith. When he could attend, he was very much at home at services. He liked the vibe of being in the synagogue, in the sanctuary. His Jewishness was very, very important to him. And his Jewishness came out not only in the sanctuary, but in his mindset. Hope, optimism, the future, working on behalf of the group, and most of all, caring about every individual as an individual, being interested in every person as an individual. I think there was a Peter Pan quality in your dad. And as a dad and as a grandfather, how he related to young and old, how he retained his passion for life. Although his body became more vulnerable, his spirit never grew old. And that spirit was, of course, revived when he met you, Ruthie. The 18 years were years of tremendous joy and care and kindness and tenderness and love with you. You traveled and you experienced together. You embraced his quirks. Jay had never feared adventure and taken care of himself. When his mother died, he had a lot of freedom as a young boy. He traveled around Cleveland. He was independent at an early age. He wasn't afraid to go anywhere or do anything, but even an adventurer needs a co-traveler and needs the care of a truly devoted and dedicated partner, which you were. And your total commitment to him in his more vulnerable years was your way of behaving the word love. And you did this caring for him at home. You created an atmosphere and an ambiance that made him feel safe and secure and supported. You know, I could show you his resume. It would be very impressive. His schooling, his time in the Air Force, his assuming the leadership of the company after his father died when he was still a young man in his 30s. I could show you the resume, the success of his work. It would all look impressive. But it is the energy, it is the intuitiveness, it is the kindness that emerged in between the lines of the resume that made Jay very special. The stuff we don't know about because he didn't talk about. But each of you I know has a story to share. A way, an anecdote, a memory, a lesson learned, a pat on the back from him. An act that he performed spontaneously or planned that deepened your relationship and which was so very thoughtful. There was no knowledge that was foreign to him. There was no information. There was no subject that Jay wasn't interested in. Arts and music and sports, politics and science and religion and movies. His mind was like a sieve. He loved learning. He kept learning. He loved asking questions. He loved reading. He loved retaining the information for its own sake, but he also always took the information to try to draw closer to other people. And the emergence of a new generation, his grandchildren, gave him special joy and satisfaction. Whether in the company or at home, his interactions with the young and with his grandchildren, it gave birth, it was a culmination of his life and it was a rebirth of his life. And he showed up for virtually all their school activities. He grew as a person as he related to the new generation and as he mentored the new generation. In this sanctuary, where he wanted to be remembered today, this is where he wanted to be remembered today. And with all of you, his guests, who he wanted to have here to share the moment. It was the place, it's the building, but it's also the people. Because for him, life was about people and friendships and family and team. And I think he would say, to echo Louis Armstrong, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. He lived with a good name, and he died with a good name. We're going to have members of the family come.
Thank you. So a few years ago, it was kind of late at night, and Papa Jay gave me a call, and he said, Brian, what are you doing tomorrow? Do you mind if I drive with you to work? So at the time, I was working at HCP. It was about 2 hours each way. So I was excited because I knew I'd get 4 hours in the car with Papa. So I picked him up 6 a.m., and we get on the road, and the first thing he says to me is he goes, hey, Brian, do you mind putting on the new Drake album? And I guess a few days before, Kevin was telling me about the album, he wanted to listen to it. And mind you, he was 84 years old at this point. And we listened to Drake for about an hour until we got to Mansfield, Ohio, and he says, can you play some Kanye? And then he wanted Kid Cudi. And then finally he said, I want my favorite, Chance the Rapper. And Jay was young at heart, no question about it. And he did take a lot of pride knowing the popular rappers of the day. But more importantly, he just wanted to be a part of something that me and Kevin loved and to experience it with us. And I think that sums his life up so well, because anyone who knows Jay knows how selfless he was. There's nothing Jay cared more about than what the person that he was with cared about. And he made everybody feel like the most special person in the world. Speaking of music, he was more of a classical music fan than rap, and he used to take me to the Cleveland Orchestra a bunch to go to the symphony. And for those of you who have been to Severance Hall, at intermission, there was like this little lounge where you could get coffee and cookies, and he used to take me there and introduce me to all of his friends, and it was basically me speed dating with a bunch of 80-year-old men. And what was amazing about it was how at ease he felt working the room. I mean, you guys have seen him work a room, and he's just so in his element. But what's so amazing about Jay is he would have felt equally at ease in the boiler room of Severance Hall, talking to the maintenance guys, trying to understand how the building was heated. And in fact, he probably would have enjoyed that even more. And if he was here today, Jay would actually probably tell us how Severance Hall was heated, what make the boiler was, and he would probably know the contractor that installed it back in the day. So don't laugh when I say this, but he's probably as passionate about boilers as probably anyone in America. Not only boilers, water heaters, indoor air quality, pretty much duct design, you name it. And he just seemed to care a little bit more than everybody else. And nothing got him more energized than our business. And I think he loved his job so much because he just, at his core, loved people. He loved our customers. He loved our associates, seeing everybody grow. And there's a wonderful quote by Mother Teresa, and it's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving. And Jay really loved to give. It was his passion, and it was his life. A couple years ago, I was in Bloomfield, Michigan with my dad and Jay. We were visiting a customer, and the customer mentioned they were from Albania. So Jay does this thing where he says, "Oh, we're in Albania," and they said, "Oh, it's a small town. It's called Skopje," and not thinking anything of it. And Jay paused and he said, "Wait, that's where Mother Teresa was from." And the customer's eyes kind of lit up. They were in shock that he even knew that fact, and I wasn't surprised at all because I've seen this kind of my whole life. And it was really just a daily occurrence with him. At 86 years old at the time, his mind was still an encyclopedia. He could speak fluently on so many topics, and we were all in awe of his memory. And, he had just endless amounts of facts, anecdotes, stories, and he was a definition of a lifelong learner. Probably the biggest impact he had on me personally was just seeing his curiosity in action. Jay was the person that would meet someone in 1982 and they'd make an offhand comment about, their kid playing high school soccer. And for the next 40 years, he would reach out to them saying, "Hey, you think your team's going to make it to states this year?" And he didn't forget to ask every year. He would always follow up. And there's something at Famous that some of you may know. It's called J-Mail. And for those of you who don't know what J-Mail is, it could be really anything like an article or a newspaper clipping. And what he would do is throughout the week, he would collect all these articles and newspaper clippings, and he would put a to and then somebody's name. And basically once a week he would bring in what amounted to basically a small suitcase worth of articles, and he would give them to the administrative team at Famous, who, God bless them, would go through thousands and send them out to probably everyone in this room. But it wasn't just newspaper articles and magazine clippings. It was books that he found at garage sales, fishing poles, college memorabilia, really anything that he knew somebody would connect with. If he saw it, he wanted to make sure that he knew he was thinking about you. So, to this day, I really don't know how he kept it all together, how he kept it all in his head. He didn't really have a system. He just willed himself to remember, and he loved being a part of everyone's life. It was amazing how much he cared, and it was all genuine. It was all completely real. He never took the opportunity for granted to learn from someone, and it didn't matter their profession, educational background, really what they did. He really looked at it as a blessing to meet someone and to learn from them. And he had this rare gift to connect with people where he really could meet somebody one time and they felt like they knew him their entire life. And I remember when I first started at Famous, I went to a trade show, I forgot where it was, and I was walking up and down the aisles, and I really couldn't get to the next booth at the trade show because so many people would stop me and say, "Wait, are you Jay Blaushild's grandson?" And I would say, "Yeah," and they would just say, "I love your grandfather, he's the best." And I remember feeling really proud that day but it's really every single day. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a famous location, if I'm just out at dinner, the amount of people that stop me just to tell me how much they love my grandfather. My lasting memory of Jay is probably just walking to a famous branch and seeing everybody just light up with smiles when he walked in the building. And it's hard not to think of Jay without having a smile on your face. So I love you, Papa. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming this afternoon. I'm Danny, one of Jay's step-grandsons. Like many of you, I got my first job at Famous Supply. I was 12 years old and would work Saturday mornings at the East Side location, taking out the trash from the front office and sweeping up the warehouse. After work, Jay would pick me up and take me with him to estate sales, where the people who ran them knew him by first name. As I was ready to leave and head to the next one or on to our next stop, Papa Jay would still be in the first room of the house and already amassed a small collection for me to start moving out to the car. And so I do want to apologize to anyone here if one of these old books or antiques ended up in your hands and you had to find a new place for it and a little reading to do. When I moved to Texas for college and my career, I continued to stay close with Papa Jay. He would send me meticulously clipped articles about the oil and gas industry from the Wall Street Journal. I knew I needed to quickly digest the articles, form my opinions, and be ready to discuss when the phone rang. I will miss his mentorship and guidance, which has shaped me into the person I've become today. My relationship gave me the privilege of accompanying Papa Jay on all sorts of adventures, from going to Browns games at Old Municipal Stadium, eating corned beef sandwiches together at Corky and Lenny's, or following him around the famous expo like a lost little puppy. I got to watch him interact with old friends, relatives, and his extended famous family. And listening to those conversations, it never ceased to amaze me how Jay could remember what street people grew up on, where their daughter was going to college, or who the toughest competitor would be in their son's weight class at the state wrestling championship. I think each of us can attest to having a piece of Jay with us, whether that be a $2 bill, a roll of Necco wafers, or a newspaper clipping with your name on it. He didn't do this simply because he had an amazing memory and that he could, but because he knew what it would mean to these people that he did remember. It was his own way of letting them know that he cared, that he understood what was important in their lives, why they came to work each day, and ultimately why they were special to him. While there will never be another person like my Papa Jay, I'd like to ask you all to think of how Jay made you feel while he was here. If we can all make one person in our lives feel as special as he made us feel, then his legacy will continue to live on through us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, and it's amazing to look out at this amazing crowd, especially on such short notice, and so many of you have traveled in from far on short notice, so thank you all for being here. And thank you to everyone at Park as well for making this happen so quickly, so thanks. If you're sitting here today, you've had a special connection with Jay, one where he knew you and he saw you, and he knew and he celebrated what made you uniquely you. And I know that because that's how he was with everyone. So as I was thinking about what to say today, I wondered what could I possibly say that wouldn't be said or hasn't already been said. So I decided that in the spirit of Jay, I'd just like to tell a few stories that hopefully make you laugh, because Jay loved to joke around and he loved to laugh and he loved to really mess with people. So my earliest memory of my grandpa was at the house I grew up in Orange Tree. And I was about 5 years old, and it was Sunday, and we were having a big family brunch. And at some point, he gathers all the kids that were there, and he gathers us together, and he pitches this idea that we should all go for a hike in my backyard because my backyard had leprechauns in it. So we're all like, come on, there's no leprechauns back there. And he's like, no, I swear, there are leprechauns back there. I know these leprechauns. I see them all the time. Let's go. So we're like, okay. So we're walking in the backyard, and we're like, you're just yanking our chain. There's no leprechauns. And then all of a sudden, we start finding candy and gold scattered throughout the forest. And we're just kids. We're like, oh my God. There are leprechauns back here. So we're gathering the candy and the gold and lining our pockets, and we're having a blast, and Jay's having fun with it. And after a minute or two, us kids were like, okay, hold on. Papa, did you just plant all this stuff? Or did anybody see anything? Did he come out here before we went out? We're trying to figure it out, but we can never really be sure. And but regardless, we consumed all the candy. So one of the other things that we did most together when I was a kid that I'll always remember was going to Indians games. We'd go with Brian, Danny, me, and Papa, and we'd go to the Indians games. And many of you probably remember the 90s where the Indians games, it was always a sellout. We were winning. It was really fun. And we would go down to the stadium and we'd park, and he'd always have a big bag. And the bag was empty, and as we started to walk to the game, he'd buy 3 bags of peanuts, then he'd buy a program, then you walk in the game and you get what they, a little memorabilia like a bobblehead or whatever. And he's slowly filling up this bag, then he stops at the gift shop and he's buying gifts. So by the time we get to our seats, he's got this big bag just full of stuff. And so he'd put on his radio and we'd watch the game. And at some point in the game, he'd reach into his bag and start giving us stuff. And of course, the most memorable thing he ever gave me was an autographed Babe Ruth baseball out of this bag. And again, I'm like 8, 9 years old. I'm like, Papa, this is incredible. This is a Babe Ruth baseball. Do you know how rare these are? This is valuable. He's like, I know, enjoy. I go, Papa, is this really a Babe Ruth baseball? He goes, yeah. I'm like, these are rare. He's like, it's fine, I got plenty. I'm like, okay. And I'm just still trying to figure out, is my grandpa just trying to amuse me, or is this really a Babe Ruth baseball? Something that Jay really loved, that maybe not a lot of people know about Jay, is that he loved dogs. He loved dogs so much, and he really adored dogs. And his favorite dog, I feel confident in saying his favorite dog, was Duke, who was a Weimaraner. And when he got Duke, he knew that there was something special about Duke. So he decided that he wanted to have him properly trained. So he asked around Cleveland to try to figure out who was the best trainer in all of Cleveland that would train Duke. So he hears about this guy, Chuck, and he calls him up. And Chuck says, I can't take the dog. I'm too busy. I've got 17 dogs as it is right now. I can't take your dog. And he's calling him and calling him and calling him to try to convince Chuck to take Duke, and he just won't do it. So Jay decides that he's just going to show up at Chuck's door, and he's going to bring Duke. And when Chuck sees Duke, Chuck will see in Duke what my grandpa sees in Duke and know that he's so special, and will just feel compelled to train Duke. He'll have no choice. And that's what happened. And they trained Duke, and he won Best of Breed. And they went to Westminster twice. If I have it correctly, I think twice they went to Westminster. And there's a cool second part of that story that I'm not going to tell due to time, but the company Famous Telephone Supply was started as a result of my grandpa finding Duke and training Duke for shows. So if you're at the Shiv and you want to ask my dad or me or anybody about it, that's a good story too. So my last memory with Papa was just about a week ago, and maybe it's only funny to me, but I'll tell it anyways. But Jay loves sports, and this year he was really enjoying following the Cavs. Loved this Cavs team, and over the course of the season, whenever we talk about the Cavs, he would say, they've had so many injuries, and it's unbelievable, this team. Every time somebody goes down, somebody new steps up, and they just keep winning. I don't know how they do it. I've never seen a team like this. So about a week ago, Julie and I went to visit Jay, and he was very tired. It was like a week ago, and he had almost no energy. But he asked me if the Cavs were playing that night, and so I told him, yeah, we're playing the Pacers at 7. And I go, oh yeah, Papa, the Cavs have another injury. And he's like, he shoots up, and all of a sudden he's got energy. He's like, oh my God, who was it? I'm like, and I felt bad. I didn't even want to tell him. I'm like, Papa, It was Jared Allen. Oh my God. All of a sudden he's got all this energy back, and I don't know if it was just being there, but it's watching him get all the life energy back into his body out of concern for something as trivial as the Cavs season. It was just very funny to me, and it made him very animated. So, Jay loved to make people laugh, and he loved to joke with people. And what was special about it is that he did it in a way where he had such a straight face and a deep conviction that it really invoked this special kind of self-doubt that you have within yourself as to whether or not he's being serious. But regardless, he walks away, you're very confused, but you're still laughing because you're not really sure what happened. So I think it was very special. And but regardless, I'm always going to remember the baseball games, the foot hanging out of the back of the trunk of his Cadillac, and all the other strange things that he would do to make us laugh and smile. So in honor of Jay, let's all share a laugh and a smile, and I'd like us to all share in a prayer as well. Jay loved and revered all religions and traditions, so I'd like to ask that we all join together in silence with eyes closed and say a prayer to whomever it is that you pray for Jay, that his soul may gracefully transition into his next phase. Life is transitory, death is a certainty, but the ever-new love and bliss of God simply is, always existing, manifesting through our individual and collective consciousness, of which Jay will always be a part. Thank you.
Four simple words. I love your dad. 4 simple words. I love your dad. And I did not hear that dozens or hundreds of times. I heard it thousands and thousands of times over the last 30, 35 years especially. So why would everybody utter that same phrase so many times? Why? Well, my father was very humble, as we know and have heard, so approachable, likable, lovable, so it's easy to say, I love your dad. But I wanted to think a little deeper about it, because the last 6 months, as I've spent more time with him, and then the last couple weeks and days, I really wanted to reflect and think even more deeply, why? And I really believe, in my heart of hearts, and in my dad's heart, and in my dad's mind, that the reason you feel like that is because he felt that way about you. The rabbi talked about these defining, difficult moments in my dad's life, with losing his mother, his brother, the divorce, the sons, my brother and I, that went to California for those years, his father, Hyman, passing when my dad was 37. He had a heart attack as well, some may know, some may not, when he was 57, and actually lost 40% of his heart. His heart was broken with my brother Scott. And he had other family separations and issues, as we all do. But if my dad was a pessimist, if he would have been, he would have looked at that glass half empty. And an optimist would look at it half full. But my father was the eternal optimist, and that glass for him was full, was always absolutely full. And his life, like all of us, I think, our life is a puzzle of things that break, that don't fit, that come together, that change. And my dad wasn't afraid of change. He loved it. It was a challenge. And he would pick himself up because of all of you and the relationships that he had with you. And in life's journey, as that picture became more clear, as he got older and wiser and shared all that wisdom with us,
it wasn't about perfection with him at all. It was about really just this journey that he was on with all of you, and so many people that aren't here with us today that are around the country or in different parts of the state or wherever they may be, or looking down above. It wasn't about perfection. In fact, a story that I'd like to share, which is a funny one, some of you may have heard it, but most I don't think have. Years ago, he used to go on these trips with one of our suppliers with about 15 distributors from around the country, and he knew them well, and he was friends, dear friends with them. And it was business, but they would have fun stuff to do, and they'd go on an excursion, and one of them was out west, and they went to the Juhuli factory, making that gorgeous glass. So when the tour was done, everybody got to the bus, and, they did the count, where's everybody? And, kind of, where's Waldo? Where's Jay? He's gone. He's not here. And someone points out, he says, there's Jay. And someone else says, what's he doing climbing out of a dumpster? My dad used to dumpster dive. He liked it. He did it usually at branches to make sure the scrap, we could get our money for it, or that we weren't damaging product or making a quality product in manufacturing. But in this case, I think he was well prepared, and he had a backpack on. And he got on the bus, and he walked down the aisle, and he handed everybody broken remnants of Juhuli glass. And he said, what this expensive as this stuff is, when they sell it, these have to be worth $300-400 each. And I think everybody probably treasures that if it's sitting on their desk or in their home or wherever it may be. But that imperfection, he saw the beauty in that. He'd rather have 20 of those than to give away than one real one for himself. The last few days, the emails, the texts, the calls, it's been unbelievable. The stories people are sharing, incredible. So many new ones. And I heard a new one Friday night that I'd like to share from Bob Ross, who's sitting right here. And he said when he was about 15 or 16, he was an umpire in Beechwood for softball league. And there was a game, and he made a call at second base. I think he said it was a double play, and he goes, I just blew the call. It was like, well, what am I going to do? There's no video. I don't have any other umpires to confer with and make a change. And the team playing was Famous Supply, and they were on the wrong side of that call. And my dad was the manager, and he was there, and fans, parents, kids yelling and screaming, at least half of them. And Bob was like, what's going on here? And at the end of the inning, my father walked up to Bob, as he told me the other night, put his arm around him before the inning started, and he said, hey, just a call. Maybe you made a mistake. It's no big deal. It's okay. And that was my dad. When he saw somebody down and out, even if it was a little thing or a big thing, he was there. And he always knew what to say. He always knew what not to say. He knew when to say it, how to say it, the time to say it. And he just had that gift that made us feel good. And he built us up. We never pushed us down. He built and lifted our spirits always, every day. I got to learn from him driving. Spent a lot of time in the car together. It was the greatest. And usually if I was a passenger, I had my notes and wrote things down and started my day when we got to work. And many times we had the long drives at night, maybe to visit a branch, and we'd get home late. I was driving. He liked to be in the passenger seat. And you could ask him a couple questions and he could talk for 3 hours. So you didn't have to do much but listen. And we would get off 271 at Richmond Road and turn right, and he was heading home. And it would get quieter. And then he would make the final turn on his street, and it would be silence for about 15, 20 seconds, happen every time. And then he would say, wow, this was the best day ever. This was the best day ever. And every time you're with him, it was. And every other day of his life was the best day ever. And I know that the old relationships and the new relationships that he kept building on and building on and building on became the best life ever. He would say he had the imperfect life, and it was perfect. He never stopped learning. He probably was on more Zoom during COVID than any person internationally, or well as North America. And I mean that sincerely. It was crazy, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. He loved it. And this last 18 years that he kept talking about, these last 18 years was the best chapter in his life. It kept getting better with Ruthie. Ruthie was unbelievable, is a cherished life partner and the greatest caregiver that I could ever imagine seeing and witnessing. My dad was happy. In Judaism, 18 is a very significant numerical and symbolic number, and it stands for Chai, which is life. You might even see it as to life, about being alive and celebrations and things that are meaningful, principles, kindness, thoughtfulness, selflessness. And as I finish here, there was a quote that I saw the other day in an email that came in from somebody that might be here today. I haven't seen everybody. And it said, the goal in life is not to live forever. The goal is to leave behind something that will. And I think my dad really, really accomplished that goal. He left a lot for all of us in our hearts and minds. And I am 100% certain that if he was here today and he's looking down or we feel his presence, there's not a doubt in my mind, that he would want to spend a moment with every person here, ask you a couple questions about what's going on to get caught up. As the rabbi said, he wouldn't be talking about himself. And he would utter 4 simple words at the end, and he would say, I love you too. 4 words, 4 simple words. I love you too. Dad, I love you. We all love you.
We rise now for the memorial prayer.
במחלות קדושים הטובים, כזוהר ורקיע מזגיבים, את נשמת ג'יי בלאושילד, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תגיא מנוחתו. אסתירנו בסתר כנפך לעולמי, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני ונחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that he performed while in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. God is now his portion. May he rest in peace. And we all say amen. Let's be seated. We want to offer our condolences to Mark and Sherry, to Ruthie, to Scott, to many grandchildren who mourn Jay today. We also want to make note of the fact that we're going to arrange the processional now to move to the burial spot. The burial is a private burial ceremony. The family asks that if you're going to rejoin them later, you can rejoin them as they receive friends for the Shiva visitation that will be at the Beachmont Country Club. You can family asks that you join them there. You can go directly there, and they will join you when they're finished with the burial service. And remembering that there are 3 days of the Shiva visitation, you can join them today, Sunday, until 8 p.m. You can also join them at Beachmont tomorrow, 1 to 3 p.m. and 5 to 7 p.m., as well as Tuesday evening, 5 to 7 p.m. We're going to remain in our seats for another moment. The pallbearers, however, should now come forward.
Well, I'm going to ask you to step in this direction. All there is this direction, please. Gentlemen, can you stay right here? All there. Sir, over here, please. Your all there. Your all there.
No, you'll follow.
You'll follow behind the clergy, please. Follow behind the clergy. Please stand.
Gentlemen, you should follow with the hands against it.
Shir Lamalot, Esa'ina El Harim, Me'ayin Yovo Adri, Adri Me'im Adonai, Ose Shemayim Ha'aretz. Al Yikei Manot, Ragata, Al Yom Shamarata, Yehu Yom Ulu Yishna, Shemayim Yisrael. Adonai Yomecha, Adonai Tziocha, Al Yad Yimnech. Yom Hashem et Yoyashecha, Yoreh Olayla, Adonai Yishmar Nom Yisrael, Yishmar et Nashecha, Adonai Yishmar Tziocha, Ulecha,
As the rabbi mentioned, the interment is private. We ask that friends kindly return directly to your cars. Thank you.